Well, thank you so much, Adam. I want to jump into a portion of our interview called The Intersection, which is a quick, rapid fire series of questions that we ask all of our guests. So thanks for bearing with me.
You're like Lipton in the actor's studio. Okay.
Exactly. You got it. So the first one is, there one person living or dead whom you'd like to sit down for an interview with, you being the interviewer? And if so, who and why?
Either Ted Williams or John Maynard Keynes, because they both were the best who ever lived in each of their professions.
What is the book or books that have changed your view of the world, and how so? And what are you reading right at the moment?
I must admit, rather shamefully, that I'm reading very little beyond COVID and economics straight up. I mean, I saw the thing in the New York Times the other day about Joe Stiglitz is reading every literary novel and history book, but Joe Stiglitz is 6 standard deviations more smart than I am.
Good for Joe. I'm not.
Yeah, I know, exactly. I mean,
I'm trying to catch up on my COVID literature myself. That's great. But what about long-term?
Long-term books that matter to me. I mean, so particularly thinking about this week, thinking about the G20 and the efforts we've tried to explain why collective action is not just some fantasy, but has deliverable benefits. There was a fabulous short book called The Logic of Collective Action by Mansur Olson. It came out nearly 50 years ago now. And it's just full of insights in how to think about this. I also, I think that the history is in many ways, as so many people are now saying, is the most important thing to read. I think Jared Diamond's work in big picture history is sometimes sloppy, of course, and overgeneralized, but getting from him into the literature about what pestilence and large scale changes have meant for the world in the past, I think it's really important.
Thinking of over the course of your career, I was wondering if there's a particular juncture or a person that you think of where you think things just made a big change and put you on the path that you ended up on.
There were 3. So first was when I came out of grad school in economics, and I had a rough time in grad school. I didn't do very well. I took leave for a while to work. I didn't like grad school, and grad school didn't like me very much. I got a job at the New York Fed, and Rick Mishkin, who teaches at Columbia, had at that time become the executive vice president, chief economist. And he gave me an opportunity to really do good work and encourage me in a way that was incredible for my career. Similarly, a few years after that, Fred Bergsten, the guy who founded with Pete Peterson, the Peterson Institute, who was the director, who you know, he gave me the chance to come in and be a fellow and take risks and do writing and opine like I was a big grown-up at a very early stage in my career. And that was enormous for my opportunity in my life. So those 2, I mean, there were other people and other opportunities, but those were sort of the critical junctures for me professionally.
And can you think of a roadblock or failure or something that happened that set you straight or that taught you a lesson?
Again, I'll pick 2. One was just simply really flaming out in my first couple of years of grad school. And having to think hard about why I was doing that. I mean, again, it's not tragedy, but it's very emotional and burdensome at the time when you're doing that. And there are people, I mean, one of my grad school classmates is Michael Kramer, who won the Nobel Prize this year, and who is a lovely human being in addition to being a fantastic scholar. And, and so you're surrounded by...
For those who don't know, 50% of economics candidates drop out of their PhD program. Yeah. I believe it's something like that.
Yeah, so. It's not a very friendly, welcoming profession. Yeah. Again, I wasn't abused. I was treated perfectly fine. But, there's been a lot of documentation on how women, people of color, anybody who sort of doesn't come from the more privileged background that I did gets even worse abuse. So, so grad school was very hard for me. And it taught me to be a little more humble, to be a little more risk-taking. But ultimately, in the end, and this was borne out by things that I wrote about and faced in the crisis a dozen years ago, a lot of the stuff that I thought was just fundamentally wrong, either ideologically or too academic in grad school, turns out I was right. I wasn't smart enough to know how to write them and point them out in a persuasive way at the time, but I was right about some of those things that proved to be very wrong. The other issue was in 2003, I had a neck injury, which led to a stroke. And I lost part of my vision. Luckily, I'm basically healthy now, except for being fat. But,
I had no idea. I did
yeah,
not know that.
well, so I mean, I might have been smarter before that happened. And so, and it took me, a good 6 months, not of rehab, but just sort of getting myself back together in psychology. And my wife was wonderful. But anyway, but so just like for many people, it gives you, and that was in my early 30s. And so it gives you a sense of vulnerability and fragility of life that I was already somewhat cognizant of because my father had been very ill a lot of my childhood, but it reinforced it. And again, like with grad school, though, I came out the other side. I was fortunate enough to live. It's now 16 plus years later, and I'm still okay. So that again gives you a sense of both humility and gratitude, but also the sense that, okay, this too shall pass. I can survive. So sorry to go a bit heavy, but those
Not at all. That's a wonderful way to end, because I think that that's not you didn't just make it 16 years past. You thrived and you accomplished so much. You became a global central banker, and you run a fantastic think tank, and you still you have all this intellect to offer us and our viewers. So thank you so much for joining.
Very generous, my friend. Thank you for having me, and thank you for continuing to be a voice for progressive but honest, real values in the economic debate.